So that is why so many linguists think that Dhad was pronounced as Ra during the classical period before eventually evolving into the modern Ba. And guess what? That would finally make Arabic truly worthy of the title language of Dhad, because it would be the only language in the world with the sound Ra.
Over the past week, I was sent this video several times, asking me about it and the doubts they now have because of it. Normally, I don't like going quickly into reaction videos, but after watching it and seeing the comments of many confused Muslims and how it can eventually affect their Quran recitation, I thought it is necessary to point out the mistakes in it, and it can also be a good opportunity to learn something new. So let's get started. The basic premise of this video is that Arabic is called the language of Dhad.
If you've ever spoken about Arabic to a native speaker, then you may have heard that Arabic is known as Lughat al-Dhad, or the language of Dhad. This is why Arabic has been known as the language of Dhad for over 1,000 years.
But the thing is, Dhad isn't a unique sound to Arabic because it exists in other languages.
It's the only language in the whole world with that sound, Ba. At least that's what a lot of people will tell you, but there's just one problem. It's not true. The sound Ba actually exists in a bunch of different languages.
So, Dhad must have sounded different from what we know today. And after exploring some old descriptions of the sound, the presenter concluded,
the proposal that I subscribe to, as do most experts in the field, is this sound, Ja. That's a pharyngalized, voiced, alveolar, lateral fricative.
So, there are in fact many problems with each stage of this logic. And so, we'll inshallah break it down piece by piece to understand what is really going on. First of all,
if you've ever spoken about Arabic to a native speaker, then you may have heard that Arabic is known as Lughat al-Dhad, or the language of Dhad. In fact, the sound's rarity is why Arabic has been known as the language of Dhad for over 1,000 years. It's the only language in the whole world with that sound.
This saying that Arabic is the language of Dhad isn't like the official name of the language or something, nor is it the adopted opinion of the scholars or grammarians of Arabic, and certainly not for over 1,000 years. In fact, in the 2nd century, Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad, who is the teacher of Sibawayhi, has stated in the first Arabic dictionary ever, العين, that ضاء, not ضاد, is only found in Arabic. Other respected Arabic dictionaries like Tajul Arus also listed ضاء as the most unique letter that defines the language and sets it apart from other languages, as far as the authors know at the time, of course. And there are many other scholars of the same opinion, and they range from the 2nd century up to the 10th century. So this is the opinion of scholars and grammarians. And therefore, this statement with his understanding as premise is inaccurate and cannot be used as basis to judge a language or draw a certain conclusion based on it. This opinion might have been popularized in recent times, but we are talking about the origin more than 1,000 years ago. But then the question still remains, where did this saying come from?
If you've ever spoken about Arabic to a native speaker, then you may have heard that Arabic is known as Lughat al-Dhad, or the language of Dhad.
Why do people say it? I mean, you must have heard it before. Well, there are many opinions as to where this saying has originated from. But the most probable one is that it came from a famous verse in a poem written by Al-Mutanabbi in the 4th century. وَبِهِمْ فَخْرُ كُلِّ مَنْ نَطَقَ الضَّادَ وَعَوْذُ الْجَانِي وَغَوْثُ الطَّرِيدِ. This was probably the very first mention of referring to Arabic as the language of Dhad. However, there is a logical error here.
Arabic has been known as the language of Dhad for over 1,000 years. It's the only language in the whole world with that sound.
Now, this statement is not necessarily wrong, but actually his conclusion is logically wrong. Because saying that Arabic is the language of Dhad doesn't necessarily mean that it is the only language with Dhad, but actually it is the most known for it. So for example, saying that America is the land of freedom doesn't necessarily mean that it is the only land where there is freedom, because this is just simply not correct. And on a linguistic level, it is like when we say that Spanish is the language of Enya, but at the same time, there is a bunch of other languages that use that sound, like Papiamento, Galician, Guarani, and many other languages. But in comparison, Spanish is a more widely used language. So saying that it is the language of Enya should not lead us to investigate that this letter used to be pronounced differently to make Spanish worthy of the title. So this conclusion from this statement is just a logical fallacy, and it should just simply mean that Dhad is strongly associated with Arabic, and that it is indeed a unique letter for its unique sifa and the place of articulation that it doesn't share with any other Arabic letter. Next.
In fact, the sound's rarity is why Arabic has been known as the language of Dhad for over 1,000 years.
It is true that Dhad is a rare sound, but again, the rarest sound in Arabic is Dha. And while Arabic is such a rich language with literally millions of words, it occurs in about 100 roots in the entire language. And as reported by الإمام الداني and الجزري, it was used in only 30 roots in the entire Quran. And according to a statistical study, it represented only 0.26% of all the words. And above it was ta, then zay, and then we have Dhad with 0.51%. So that was about the basic premise of this video. Let's move to the more technical part.
B. That's like the letter D but emphatic, with a constriction in your throat. Dhad? You might expect to find it near the tip of the tongue. That's where the letter D is pronounced after all. D. And sure enough, if you look at the vocal tract diagram, you'll find the letter D and the letter T right there near the tip of the tongue. But that's not where you find Dhad.
And here is the first major mistake. Comparing Dhad to Dal, or a heavy Dal, Da, is a major error. And it is something that we specifically warn learners against doing when learning the sound, simply because they are not the same and they even have different sifat or characteristics. So saying that Dhad resembles Da or pronouncing it as Da is a major mistake, and it is definitely not Dhad of the classical Arabic and the one that we use to recite the Quran. Here he goes even further, describing Dhad as a plosive sound, like Da.
Now, in modern Arabic, Dhad involves complete closure of the vocal tract, so it's definitely a plosive.
First of all, modern Arabic, or MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, is Fusha, and we also call it Classical Arabic. It is also the Arabic you read in the Quran. These are all the same. The Arabic you hear in the news reports is Fusha, MSA. So he is now clearly talking about the standard, modern Arabic, and referring to its Dhad as plosive sound, which is also another mistake. If I hear someone reading or reciting and saying arud with plosiveness and qalqala, which will accompany the plosive sound in Arabic, it would be considered a mistake and it won't be accepted. But then the real question arises. If this is not the proper Dhad, where did he get the idea from that it is a plosive sound?
Now, in modern Arabic, Dhad involves complete closure of the vocal tract, so it's definitely a plosive. Contrast that with the Arabic sound, B, which is a plosive. It has complete closure of airflow.
Well, many Arabs today do pronounce it as a heavy Dal, Da. This is a fact. But this happens as part of their dialects, and not as the proper classical Arabic pronunciation. In fact, some Arabs pronounce Dhad as Dha. But these dialect versions of sounds do not only happen with Dhad, but with many other letters. Take for example, Qaf is pronounced as Ka in some Palestinian areas, but as Ga in some Yemeni and southern Egyptian dialects, and as A in some northern Egyptian dialects, and as Gha in some Sudanese dialects, and some also pronounce it as Qaf, of course. Jim is also pronounced as Ga in Egypt, and as Ya in some Kuwaiti and Iraqi dialects, and as Ja in some Levantine dialects. So the point is, yes, some Arabs, as part of their dialect, do pronounce Dhad as a heavy Da. But since we cannot consider all other variations of other letters as classical Arabic, we cannot use this pronunciation of Dhad as the classical pronunciation of Dhad today, and then use it as the proper pronunciation. Secondly, this demonstration of the dialect Dhad is also incorrect.
It's the language of Dhad. So what does Sibawayh say about Dhad? B. B. That's like the letter D but emphatic, with a constriction in your throat.
First, I have to say that this is a pretty good effort for a non-Arab to replicate the sound. But as an Arab who also uses this version in my own dialect, this isn't it. There is too much tongue involved, and there is certainly no constriction in the throat or anything like that. He could have meant that the epiglottis is pushing back, but that is not really where he is pointing. A heavy da is pronounced just like the normal da, with the tip of the tongue making contact with the alveolar ridge, but you will add three things. You will raise the back of the tongue, lower the middle part of the tongue, and then when these two happen, your epiglottis will automatically push back, which creates the full mouth or the heavy emphatic sound. Da. Again, this is not the proper Arabic Dhad. And so, when we get to this point,
what if Dhad wasn't always pronounced as B? What if it had an older, rarer pronunciation?
It then becomes clear that, yes, there is another pronunciation of Dhad, and that is the proper one of classical Arabic. But it is not rarer or anything. It is being used till this very day, and it is how Quran teachers teach it. That's how I teach it today. And that's how many Muslims, Arabs or non-Arabs, already use it in the Quran today. And then afterward, this video tries to explore the rare sound of Dhad and its origin. And not surprisingly, he comes across pieces of evidence that accurately describe many features of the proper Dhad that we use today.
He's telling us explicitly that Dhad is not a plosive. It's instead classified with all the other fricative consonants. We know the sound is likely a fricative or had a fricative-like quality to it.
Yes, Dhad is a fricative sound. That is correct. And we call it in Arabic حروف الرخاوة. And one of the major صفات of Dhad is رخاوة. It can also be said رخاوة. In other words, we can extend its sound by keeping the airflow. And I can keep on going for as long as I want because it is a fricative. More on the sifa of rakhawa and istitala of the Dhad, watch this lesson. It is so important. So yes, Dhad is a fricative sound. You got that right. After that, he shows this diagram, which is the earliest diagram of makharij by Yusuf as-Sakkaki. And I was truly impressed that he found this diagram, because it is indeed very rare. But was he able to benefit from it?
But that's not where you find Dhad. Instead, Dhad is all the way at the back of the tongue, near the roof of the mouth. This is like no other letter in the diagram. It seems to be some sort of sound that requires a raised and back tongue. Now this is helpful information for sure, but it doesn't really give us a conclusive answer as to how Dhad is pronounced.
Here, the problem is that since the basis is inaccurate and not proper, it will cause problems later when analyzing information. The diagram is, of course, 100% correct. There's no question about it. And yes, this is where you start pronouncing Dhad. This is the pressing area. The trick to get the proper Dhad is to press at the sides of your tongue against the molars, and the pressure has to happen gradually from the back to the front, where there is slight pressure to allow air to escape. And not surprisingly, Sibawayh, like Al-Jazari, الإمام الداني, and all Quran scholars describe Dhad in the same way.
And sure enough, Sibawayh agrees. He writes instead that Dhad is pronounced, quote, between the first part of the side of the tongue and the adjacent molars. Sibawayh writes, quote, among the limp consonants, the fricatives, are, among others, the Dhad. He's telling us explicitly that Dhad is not a plosive. It's instead classified with all the other fricative consonants.
So, yes, of course, his description of the place of articulation is incredibly accurate, and it is what we do to pronounce the proper classical Arabic Dhad. Next is a very important point that he raises. After reading the description of the sound of Dhad made by Sibawayh, he came to the conclusion that it might have actually sounded like yeah.
That's weird, right? the side of the tongue hitting the adjacent molars, that's almost like the letter Y. Y.
And this perfectly demonstrates why learning pronunciation or the Quran can never be taken from books, because you will have your own version that is actually so far from reality. But now you might ask a very legitimate question. Why is it that his version is wrong and our version is correct? Why isn't it the other way around? I mean, he says,
how could we even know what something was pronounced like over 1,000 years ago?
Well, this is pretty simple, because it is done through the Islamic tradition of passing down the Quran. Since the Quran is an audiobook, it is passed down sound for sound, word for word. So how each word is pronounced has been passed down generation after generation. And it is how it is pronounced today. So the way that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who is the most proficient in Arabic ever, has passed it down to his companions, who then passed it down to the generation afterward, and then the next generation, and so on. So yes, we know exactly what it sounds like, and that is not even 1,000 years ago, but actually more than 1,400 years ago. And this also shows how much of a huge impact the Quran had on the Arabic language. And after all that, he tried to guess what the extinct version of Dhad sounded like.
The proposal that I subscribe to, as you most experts in the field, is this sound, ja. That's a pharyngalized, voiced, alveolar, lateral fricative. It fits a lot of the criteria we were looking for earlier.
This pronunciation is certainly not Dhad, and if it was anything, it would be a dialect version of the sound, which is also unlikely. But the presenter continues to present his strongest evidence that this was indeed the original sound of Dhad.
But the strongest piece of evidence of ja being the classical pronunciation, in my opinion, is that that sound actually still exists in Arabic. Exists the Tihami Qahtani tribe, which reportedly pronounces Dhad as ja.
The theory of ancient Dhad, which has become very popular recently, since it is found on the Wikipedia page of the letter itself, mixing between the dialect version of the sound and opinions of the Orientalists, and then throwing into the mix the classical version taught by the early Muslim scholars, and then reinterpreting that. And on a side note, if you are a fan of Wikipedia, just look up the hoax of the inventor of the toaster or the Bikolim conflict, just to get an idea that sometimes things can go wrong, even when having references. And for the record, and to be clear, I certainly have no problem that there was an ancient version of Dhad. It might be true. The problem is linking the description and explanation of Muslim scholars of Arabic linguistics and the Quran to this theory. السكاكي, الخليل بن أحمد, سيبويه, الداني, الجزري, and all of these mountains all explained Dhad as we pronounce it today and as it is used in the Quran. Linking a pre-Islam theory to this explanation is a major mistake and a big confusion. But then, what about the strongest piece of evidence?
Southern parts of the Arabian Peninsula, there are a number of different dialects that are famous for retaining traditional features of Arabic linguistics. And in the Asir province of Saudi Arabia exists the Tihami Qahtani tribe, which reportedly pronounces Dhad as ja.
Now, regardless of the fact that this sound with this pronunciation isn't used by Arabs, not Tihami or Qahtani. I mean, you can easily Google Arabs speaking these dialects and listen to them, and you be the judge. But the existence of a certain linguistic feature in these dialects, or any other dialect for that matter, does not mean that this is the origin of the language or the correct version of it. Take for example, in the dialogue of Tihama, they use something called al-an-ana, which is turning the letter Ain into Hamza. So they would then turn a word like fi'l into fi'l. Ni'mah, they would say ni'mah. And they also have something called al-tamtamaniya, which is turning the lam of the definite article al into mim. So they would then say al-qamar as am-qamar and al-bayt as am-bayt. So there it is, from the Tihami dialect. They have al-an-ana and al-tamtamaniya. But if these are used or heard today, they would certainly be perceived as mistakes, clear mistakes even, when compared to proper Arabic. So how can this ever be used as evidence or even indication to the features of classical Arabic. There are also other mistakes, confusions in the video relating to the study of linguistics, phonetics, and phonology that I didn't mention, and I only focused on what I think you can directly benefit from. In spite of that, I really commend the effort and I really like the presenter's passion to learn Arabic and be curious about it. And I hope to see more Muslims also interested to learn Arabic like this. So, in conclusion, the sound of Dhad is not a mystery or something that needs guessing or finding out. It is something that we use today exactly as it was explained and described by the earlier scholars and as it reached us with the Quran tradition. There could be other ancient version of Dhad or other letters pre-Islam, but that is not the standard variation of classical Arabic and not what our scholars have described in their work. Finally, if you made it this far and learned something new, you'll probably love this Makharij series in which we dive deeper into Dhad and basically every Arabic letter and how it is supposed to be pronounced properly. Thanks for watching. If you want to start learning the Tajweed, then start with this playlist. And also, don't forget to check my latest book about Tajweed and download the companion app. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.